Our gospel lesson for today, which we are going to share before we hear this beautiful music, comes from Matthew chapter 14, beginning with verse 13 through verse 21. It's a very familiar miracle story that Matthew records. He says, "Now when Jesus, being tired, heard all that was said about him, he withdrew from the crowds in a boat, and he went away to a deserted place and was lonely there. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on the foot from all the towns. And he went ashore and saw a great crowd, and though tired, had compassion for them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, 'This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go to the villages and buy food for themselves.' But Jesus said to the disciples, 'They need not go away. You give them something to eat.' And they replied, 'We have nothing here but 2 fish and 5 loaves.' Jesus said to them, 'Bring the crowd here to me.' He ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides the women and children." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. This is the only miracle performed by Jesus that is recorded by all 4 Gospels. Out of the 37 recorded miracles that we have from Jesus, this is the only miracle recorded by all 4 Gospel writers. I'd like to suggest that the reason is because this one story captures the basic struggles that are common to every one of us. Jesus was tired, so he went off to a place to be by himself where he found himself lonely. There was a crowd he bumped into who were hungry. He told his disciples, "You feed them," which miffed them just a little bit, if not angered them. In this one story, did you hear it? We hear about people who are hungry and angry and lonely and tired. The common difficulties and struggles of every human. Now, for those of you who have ever been in a 12-step program, if you have been to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting or an NA meeting or an Al-Anon meeting for the friends and family members of alcoholics, you know hungry, angry, lonely, and tired is the acronym for HALT. H, hungry, A, angry, L, lonely, T, tired, HALT. And we're taught in 12-step programs that if you're about to make a big decision, you halt and ask yourself, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? If you're about to engage in an important conversation, you halt and you ask yourself, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Because these things affect the way we live our lives every day. And they need to be remedied before we move into the important details and issues of life. So the biblical text, this one story, brings together all these struggles. 2 weeks ago, I got to spend an extended weekend at the home of Morton Lauridsen, a choral composer of De Re Dawn and O Magnum Mysterium and the Lux Eterna. I'm only dropping that story because the choir's behind me this morning. There were 8 of us gathered at his home, spending the weekend together. Among them, 2 people were Dana and Mary Joya. Dana is the Poet Laureate of California who was the director of the National Endowment of the Arts for 7 years. And one morning we were sitting together talking, and Dana said, when I was National Endowment of the Arts director, he said, I pumped more money into choral music in the United States than had ever been pumped in there before. Talking to Morton. And I asked him why, and he said, a lot of people don't know this. He said, but do you know that choral music is the #1 participated art form in the world? In fact, the 3 best art forms afterwards don't total the number of people who through community choirs, church choirs, school choirs, and other choral places participate in choral music. If music is our language, choral music is our dialect. It's the way we speak and hear one another and even hear from God. Music is one of God's primary methods of speaking to our deepest needs. And so what's happened this morning, interestingly enough, is the gospel lesson lays all of our needs out for us. And we have here the voice of God and the ministry of music to meet those needs. And so I invite you, as I did in the prayer a moment ago, give yourself permission to Sabbath, to sit and rest. Let your hunger be fed by what you hear. Let your anger be calmed. Let your loneliness be remedied by the community that is gathered around you. And if you're tired, rest for a while and listen to this music. May God bless this hour with God's presence. Amen.